spend a couple of minutes, actually 20 minutes, on a panel discussion with these two gentlemen. Is everyone doing okay? We're like the last thing between you guys and happy hour. So I thought I would start by just, I'd love to hear your stories. How did you get into researching games and applying deep learning in this particular field? What brought you here to where we are today?
Okay, so I may say first. So I think game is like a very interesting environment, and as I mentioned in the presentation, it actually gives you like something that is more than supervised training, right? So previously I was working on like computer vision, in which we have a data set to work on, and then our task is trying to push the number for the accuracy as high as possible. But for game, things are different because agent actually can learn what it will see in the future, and it will have this kind of choice to see what it will learn in the future. So this is very different from supervised training. I think it's and also more similar compared to the real world scenarios, in which we all try to select our own way of life, and then we get trained along the way. So this seems to be very interesting. And also, I think this entire direction is still a very new direction, and lots of people have already tried that direction for a while, but I feel like there's still a long way to go, and there's still like a lot of rooms to explore. So that's the reason, I think.
How about you?
Yeah, for me, I came from the other side, so I came from the gaming industry, but I was interested in machine learning, and we did a few simple things with machine learning, like matchmaking system and skill systems and other things. But then I saw what started happening with Google DeepMind's results and Facebook's results, and saw the applicability for this to actually do something completely new in games, especially game AI, which, like I showed, has been stagnant for a long time, and also all the animation and content generation potentials. There's so much we can do with machine learning for entertainment. So I got lucky that this R&D organization was started 2 years ago, and I got to do the deep learning and AI part of that R&D lab.
Great. Could you guys describe some of the biggest challenges you face up to this point, both on the technical aspect as well as just organizationally? What are some of the challenges you've seen?
Technically, as you saw, these are prototype games. Actually getting them into production games is a big engineering hurdle. It's much, much harder to get them into production than actually doing some experiments and doing research on them. And organizationally, it's all the game teams and the game developers and game designers will need to learn new methods. They won't have to become machine learning experts, but they will have to direct the behavior of the AI in a completely different way than they are used to, for example.
Yeah, I think from the research point of view, there's a lot of space we can explore, which basically means that a lot of open problems that we need to actually address. So for example, I think StarCraft is still like a very hard problem, and for now, I think the best AI that we can get can easily be beaten by any professional player or maybe like strong amateur players. So I think recently there's a competition between professional players and AI. So you see like the game is basically one-sided. It's very easy to beat all this AI. So which basically means that the technique that we are using is still like a very, very preliminary stage, and there's a lot of things we need to do. For example, like can we deal with like exponential action space, right? We have, for example, if you are one player and you want to control 100 units in your game so that they collectively will address some of the goals and to achieve some of the goals. But in that case, how could we design algorithms to make them work very well and efficiently? So this is actually a very hard problem. And there's a lot of other problems, for example, the sample efficiency problem, right? So the AI has to play millions of games to get this working, but I mean, for any kids, they play the game for a few times and they get the idea of it. They may even get bored of it. So in that case, there's a huge gap between human and computer. And still, we don't know why that is the reason. So still, I have to say, like, we are still working on this weak AI region, and it's very far from this strong AI region yet.
Magnus, you talked a lot about the future of gaming and some of the areas for development. I'd love to get a better understanding, if we fast forward 20 years, what does the game look like to the consumer? And what does this gaming industry look like, given the advancement of AI? We'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
So 20 years is really, really hard because everything is moving so fast right now. I would stop at 10, which is...
Fair enough, 10?
Yeah. So hopefully we will have virtual reality, which is clunky and not really mainstream today, has gone mainstream, or augmented reality or mixed reality, whatever it will be. So our environments will be much, much more immersive. Another big difference is I hope we can do social interactions, as I showed you, much better than we can today, and not just violent interactions. And the third thing is, I think, what we have seen in TV and film, that user-generated movies on YouTube, for example, is huge today. We haven't gotten that revolution yet in gaming. I think it will come. As soon as the tools get more powerful, the procedure generation tools, the self-learning AI, where people can actually, instead of programming the AI or scripting it, they will direct the AI like the director, and or tame the AI to be able to create new experiences. So user-generated content I also see in the future.
Makes a ton of sense. I actually produced my wedding in using a VR studio because I think that it will definitely be a content format that's very much embraced by the consumers. How about you, Yuandong? What do you think in 10 years?
Yeah, I think 10 years is very long. I think 10 years ago, no one and very few people have smartphones, right? And now everyone has smartphones, and everyone uses smartphones to take pictures. And I think it's very hard to predict what's going on. I think I totally agree what Marcus just said. So I think hopefully we'll have more strong AI in the games so that the game become more interesting. And the human probably will be focused on more on the creative side of the game rather than repetitive work, right? So imagine that you have an environment that you can have a lot of bots at your disposal, and you can ask all the bots to do whatever you want. You can create interesting like dynamics and behaviors in the entire game. You can be a king in the game, and then you basically can actually have, using natural language, to talk with all your bots who act as maybe your subordinates, right? And then we can all these things together can collectively finish or accomplish some kind of big wonders. So this kind of game probably is more interesting if we see like 10 years from now. And also we might see like a more user-generated game, like we might not need to ask a writer to write novels for you. You can generate novels. You might generate content that you can get, and you can basically have your own story, and you basically ask AI to write your own story explicitly and create your environment that only belongs to you, and ask other people to play and to experience the environment that you have already experienced. So this is something that could be very fascinating and could be very interesting in terms of human interaction. So I think that's one possibility.
Great. So I'm very excited about the application of AI in gaming because it is such a great environment for that. It's a very constrained environment where you can do a lot of experiments, and it's a very pure environment in some ways. What have we learned in this environment that could be applied to other use cases and problems that you guys are particularly excited about?
I think one thing that obviously could be fit into this environment is, for example, self-driving car, right? For example, all the high-risk activities that would need like a very strong model in the real world can be first tested in a virtual environment. And once that works well, and try to replicate that in the real environment. That's one possibility. I think in the future, the virtual environment will become more and more interesting and more immersive, so that people are willing to jump into the virtual environment first, rather than have our boss to jump outside the virtual environment to the real world. And this will create interesting dynamics as well.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to reinforcement learning, like Andrew said this morning, that it requires so much data, it only really works in games. And that's not a problem for us, of course. We are fine with it working in games. But the experiments we can do in games, in the simulations, wouldn't be possible to do in the real world. So we can discover how far can we take these models, how smart can they be, before hopefully being able to transfer them into real physical systems eventually.
Great. Just one last question before we adjourn. What advice do you guys have for future game developers, future gamers, for people in the ecosystem? What is your top one or two advice?
If you're an independent game developer, I would start much smaller. Don't try to play the whole game like we did here. Start with a small feature of your AI. Keep your behavior trees and just try to think what's hard to implement with the ordinary programming and scripting, and think, can a small neural network solve this problem? And we have found that, yes, it's usually not that hard. And these are much simpler problems than playing the full game from vision, like we just saw examples of here. So start small.
Yeah, I think I agree with Marcus that we probably need to change our mindset into a more high-level thinking. So, for example, whenever we want to solve a problem, right? So now we have like another alternative way to solve it by putting everything into a deep model and ask the model to train to get the result that we want. So instead of having like a human labeled, we actually have like a lot of automatic services that is at our disposal to basically train our model and basically to finish the goal. So I think that this is actually one of the very important parts. So this is not only for game developers, for even gamers, but also for many people who used to get education from schools telling that, okay, you only need to get one skill mastered and you will be good for the rest of life. This is no longer true, probably like from now on. So right now it's really like we need to basically use all the tools that we have at our disposal to get a thing solved, no matter how complicated the tool is, right? So in many cases, a computer actually can do much better than human do. So we need to use all these tools to increase the efficiency. That's probably the most important part.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Yuandong and Magnus. Please join me and give me a round of applause. Oh, you had a question?
Yeah. So the question was, is there a value for a game studio to design a bot like we saw here to improve the game? That's exactly what we're doing. We are actually not releasing this bot out into a real game. We're using it to test our games. So we have 60 players in a multiplayer game, and it takes a huge effort to test those games with humans. So the plan is to use these self-learning agents to actually test the games much more efficiently, and in the end, improve the games.
Great. All right, round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys so much, and thank you for staying so late with us.
All right, that concludes our session today, and thank you all for coming. We have a dinner banquet tonight. If you have signed up for the dinner, it will start at 7, but you can check in at 6:30. So take some break, and see you tomorrow morning if you are not going for dinner.